Good evening and welcome to this special presentation and discussion on a sustainable and resilient Rochester, brought to you by the League of Women Voters Rochester. My name is Anna Froling, President of LWV Rochester, and I will be a moderator this evening's discussion. I want to thank LWV members for helping to organize this event. LWV is a volunteer organization active at the local, state, and national level to encourage citizens to vote and to participate in government. Our presentation this evening will be focusing on a sustainable and resilient Rochester. Transformational partnerships, public-private, are advancing the next generation of climate action. In 2017, the City of Rochester adopted an energy action plan, which outlined goals for reduced energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions. Rochester has been working to achieve these goals, building a culture of sustainability through policy implementation, organizational leadership, and community engagement. Two recent examples of projects include the development of district energy system. Mr. Ramsey will be talking on that, and the creation of sustainability and resiliency community work plan. Lauren Jensen will be talking with us on that. Following the presentation, we will have time for questions. Please enter your questions through the Zoom chat box. LWV members will be monitoring the questions and passing them on to me to ask during the last part of the program. We will try to get to as many questions as possible during the question portion. Just a couple things on the Zoom instructions. This program is being recorded and will be made available via a link on our website and Facebook page. You are encouraged to turn on your cameras. To avoid distractions, attendees' microphones will remain muted. And open the chat box to ask questions, find additional information, and links to such information as attending upcoming LWV Rochester events. Volunteer to participate on our lobby and observer corps. Right now, the session is the legislature is in session. You can also volunteer to help with voter registration, and candidate forums will be coming up this fall. While there, you can join on the chat. You can click on a link to join or renew your membership with LWV Rochester. And also, we will now move on to our evening's presentation. We are delighted to have Scot Ramsey, Manager of Facilities and Property, City of Rochester, with us this evening, and also Lauren Jensen, Sustainability Coordinator for City of Rochester. We're going to start with Lauren Jensen. She will outline the Sustainability and Resiliency Community Work Plan, highlighting focus areas, strategies, and tactics for the city and community partners to pursue. So I am going to go ahead and turn this over to Lauren Jensen. Thank you. Welcome for coming this evening.
Thank you, Anna, for having us, and to the rest of League of Women Voters for letting us join you tonight to share this presentation. To get us started, Anna shared a bit of background on our kind of energy and sustainability planning here in Rochester. But back in 2017, the city adopted its energy action plan, and this was in coordination with the comprehensive plan that we were looking to adopt as well. So the goal of it was to kind of guide community development in a way that was sustainable, and the categories of the plan focused on power generation, buildings, and transportation. They also outlined the goals that we as a city adopted, which include 1.5% annual retail energy savings. Thanks to RPU and their conservation efforts, we meet that goal every year. It also outlined 25% renewable energy by 2025. Again, thanks to input from the community and our partners at RPU, we will be 100% renewable by 2030 with the approval of their new resource plan. And then finally, it outlined GHG greenhouse gas emission reduction goals from a baseline in 2007 for 15% reduction in 2015, 30% reduction by 2035, and 80% by 2050. So this plan was really kind of a foundation. And while it outlined various priorities to focus in each of these categories, it really was still lacking equity in its implementation. And when we think about sustainability, as a city, we're trying to approach sustainability in the triple bottom line. So not only are we thinking about environment and economy, but we're thinking on social equity. And the way the government can help make this happen, or our local city municipality, is through the vision and direction that we provide, enabling conditions that bring the community in to be a part of this, the rules and regulations, and the resources that we share with the community as well. So putting together the sustainability plan was meant to build off of the existing energy action plan, but incorporate equity into its design and implementation. So we took a broader approach and we created a community task force. This was 45 members in the community that participated in monthly meetings for about a year to develop this sustainability and resiliency community work plan. The task force itself was 20% people of color, which at the time was higher than the average for the city of Rochester. And it really focused on the voices in our community who are typically the most impacted by our government decision-making processes and who will be the most impacted by climate change, but typically have the least amount of influence in these processes, and kind of paired those together with those in our community who do kind of have the overall influence and control in decision-making. So the goal and the purpose of this task force was to develop this plan for our community, to guide the mayor and the city council in adopting and modifying policies, services, practices, and programs that would help the city meet these broader goals. It would broaden the city's definition of sustainability and resiliency, helping all community members to kind of understand that triple bottom line approach and the importance to it, and then create additional goals and metrics that would shine a light on sustainability and resiliency, specifically focusing on environmental justice. So the vision that the task force came up with was an equitable, inclusive community where people, economy, and environment are supported and thrive together. This was kind of what guided us throughout our process and was really kind of the first task that the task force took on, was to create this vision so that we had something that we were constantly working towards in the development of this plan. Part of the plan, putting it together, we took existing community plans and documents from the city, as well as community organizations, and divided those kind of into categories that we'll see later on based on the plan's structure. And we had the task force members review those existing plans to determine where there were opportunities or gaps. And then we paired that with the community engagement that we collected. So using the task force members and their existing relationships that they developed within the community, we really, again, focused on the voices that we don't typically hear from in these processes. So we hosted over 30 listening sessions, which were one-on-one sessions with individuals or small groups that just kind of asked open-ended questions about what they envisioned for Rochester's future, what would allow them and their families to thrive here, what would make them feel more connected to their community. And really what we got out of that was a long, long list. And what we were able to pull from was identifying these community needs. And so across the board in almost every conversation, we heard affordable housing and living wages as a need, better communication and systems in place for accessing community resources or knowing about them, accessibility of transportation in terms of the cost, the routes, the times, more cultural activities throughout the community and an emphasis on those, diversity across the board in representation and in the opportunities that our community has. So businesses, local government, boards and commissions, career assistance, workforce development. Climate change was obviously a big one since the focus of this plan was creating a resilient community. But something we learned is that a lot of people aren't really necessarily familiar with what climate change means for us or their community and how it might affect them. And then sustainable infrastructure was another one that came up. So our task force took all of these identified community needs, the gaps and opportunities that we identified from the existing plans, and they strategized to come up with 6 focus areas that the plan would include. Across those 6 focus areas, we have 34 strategies, and then within those strategies are 107 tactics. This plan is really meant to be a living document, understanding that as we start to pursue strategies or as technologies advance, some of these things may change. Some of the tactics and the way we approach them may change Timelines may differ. Resources or grants or funding that might become available could change some things as well. But each of these strategies and tactics were additionally mapped against UN Sustainable Development Goals so that there was a global picture and connection to this plan, as well as the focus areas of our own city's comprehensive plan. And all of that is kind of feeding into the bigger picture of City Council and the priorities that we've set as a municipal entity. So all of this kind of works to feed up and build into those priorities. Within those 34 strategies and 107 tactics, 56 of those tactics are really viewed as city-led, meaning that it's work that is either kind of taken care of by existing city teammates and departments or would fall into their kind of jurisdiction. 51 tactics are community-led, so really it's work that is kind of taking place or being done by community organizations and would fit kind of in their role and objectives. Again, this is a pretty close to an equal split because this is really viewed as a community plan. The city, as we are just one entity, it's not something that we can really achieve on our own. You know, the goal here is to create a sustainable and resilient community, and we're just one piece of that. So we really wanted community members, one, to be involved in the development process and to see themselves in this plan, and therefore want to be a part of its implementation once it was finished and complete. Further, we've broken down these tactics by the timeline that they are expected, or we expect them to take. So again, it's a pretty even mix of tactics that are kind of already in progress, but maybe just need a little boosting, some additional resources or filling in of the gaps. Tactics that are short term that we expect to achieve in 1 to 3 years, midterm being 5 to 10, and then long term being 10 plus years. This slide here just shows a really small snippet of the 34 strategies. So I just pulled out a few from each of our focus areas to kind of show the broad range of topics that this plan is really focusing on. It includes anything from how we power our buildings and focusing on renewable electricity to resilience hubs. So how does our community respond to and prepare for natural disasters or other things of the sorts? How are we providing and increasing residents' access and education to respond to those needs, ensuring that residents and visitors enjoy the same level of safety and security in our community, regardless of race, ethnicity, age, or other demographics. Again, affordable housing came up. So how are we improving, one, the accessibility of housing in our community, but two, the equity of it, how it's being built and developed? Are they energy efficient homes, which therefore reduce utility burdens on our community members? Programs in place that can support and build a diverse workforce, connecting those to green jobs and programs that help build community capacity. Policies and programs that accelerate the transition to lower carbon transportation. So how are we incentivizing and building out the infrastructure for electric vehicles, encouraging the adoption of electric vehicles? Do we have equitable bus stations and routes across the neighborhoods in our community? Do we have micro mobility programs in place that are easy for people to use and encouraging the transition away from single occupancy vehicles to other modes of transportation that are less carbon intensive? And then kind of a broad environmental health is one of our categories. So what are we doing to look at air quality, land, soil, water quality, all of those things. So again, these are just strategies and there are several tactics outlined underneath these strategies. And our next step here is to really kind of map all of those against the community organizations and city departments. So we've already started to do that a little bit. We had, community organizations that were a part of the development of this plan, as well as city departments that weighed in on the strategies and tactics. So it'll be continually checking in with those groups on a biannual basis to see how these strategies can fit into their work plans or their objectives. What updates are there? What progress has been made? What are kind of the next steps? Really for the community side of things, it'll be kind of my role to continue to connect and engage with community members and organizations who we see or who want to be a part of the implementation of this plan. So again, continuing to share the progress we're making internally, externally with the community, and then listening to the community in terms of how the city might help broaden the impact. So what are opportunities that are available for us to support or influence the work being done, or collaborate on the strategies that are outlined in this plan? And then just again, community communication is a big piece of this. So not only constant communication with city departments and community partners, but just broadly to community members in general. So we are working on a website that will kind of share continual updates, continue to share the different strategies and tactics with the plan so that community members can continue to become more familiar with this and hopefully find ways that they feel like they can be a part of the plan and its implementation. And with that, I will hand it over to Scott.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to present this district energy project. I will share my screen if I can.
I had to stop Lauren's screen sharing, so Scott, you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay. All right, can you see my screen okay?
Yes. Yes. But do you want to put it in presentation mode?
Okay. All right, so here's the situation. We have 5 of our city buildings in Rochester that are heated by a steam line connected to the Olmsted County Waste Energy Facility. And that steam line is at the end of its useful life. In 2019, they did a study and concluded that there was no way to replace it that would not be economical. The numbers you see there, the 30 million and 45 million to convert, were 2019 dollars, so it probably would cost more. So they're proposing to shut off the steam line in October of next year. So the picture there shows downtown Rochester. You can see the city hall, and then you can see the library and the civic center. Those buildings are all served by a steam line that comes from that county waste facility about a mile away. So that's our situation. We are in design of a district energy system, and a district energy system is really a community scale thermal energy. It's an underground network of chilled water pipes and heating pipes. And we're converting our buildings to 130-degree water, which is another key point. So we're using low temperature hot water. You might be more familiar with buildings that are 180-degree hot water, and then steam systems are generally less than 300 degrees Fahrenheit. So the low temperature hot water is key for our buildings, which then allows us to aggregate the loads. It gives us flexibility, efficiency, resiliency, and it allows us to use different technologies that can help us get to renewable. So this is a chart I received from Evergreen Energy. They're a firm out of St. Paul that has been contracted to help us as a peer review as we put together a district energy project. To the left, you can see back in the 1880s and 1930, the first district energy system were steam. And then in 1930 to 2020, there's 2 iterations of the district energy that were 180-degree hot water. And then the 4th generation shown off to the right is the 130-degree water low temperature system. And I'll be talking a lot about that 130-degree water because that is key. As you can see, the operating temperature line, steam is less than, like a little below 300 degrees Fahrenheit. And then in the middle, the 2nd, 3rd generation is 180, and then 130. You can see the efficiency goes up as the temperature goes down to serve these buildings. So if we can get our buildings converted to 130-degree water and get distribution to connect the buildings, that is the foundation that will allow us to take advantage of some of these renewable energy sources. There's a number of them listed there. The key ones that we're planning to implement right away are geothermal, but we're also making plans on how we would do solar, thermal, solar PV. Even geothermal technology has advanced even in the last couple of years. So technology is really progressing rapidly. So we don't know what the future technology will be, but by having the distribution of the bill connected to all the buildings and having 130-degree water really sets us up to take advantage of any future energy source. Steam worked well, and 180-degree water worked well for the last 100 years. The next 50 years is 130-degree water systems. Again, our vision for Rochester, there was a visioning session where the city council and other leaders, we asked for some direction, some guiding principles, and the direction was we need to have something that gets us to renewable, to take advantage of the fact that RPU in Rochester is planning to be 100% renewable by 2030. So we're trying to position ourselves for that. What this slide shows, again, is interconnected buildings. That's key. And if the buildings are low temperature hot water, which is 130 degree, then if one building's calling for heating and another building's calling for cooling, then that heat can simply be transferred between the buildings instead of a building running an air conditioner and rejecting the heat outside, and another building having to run a boiler to add heat. And you can see some of the advantages or some of the different technologies there that could be added for a system set up this way. So this is a diagram showing our the salmon colored facilities are the Rochester City facilities. North is to the top. So we would have a district energy system, a new energy station on the north side of the Civic Theater. And then we would have hot water supply and return and chilled water supply and return that go to the city buildings. And not shown on here is geothermal. We're planning to add geothermal to the system, but we're in the midst of a geothermal study. And that study will help us determine exactly where we're putting the geothermal wells. Also on this diagram, you can see in purple are some properties that are close by. The salmon colored city buildings are about 800,000 square feet, and the available building on those different purple lots is about 1.5 million square feet. So we have connections to try to be able to connect to these private developments when they occur. And we are doing feasibility studies to look at 2 different geothermal systems, which I'll explain toward the end of the presentation. And the idea there is try to encourage the private developers to connect to our system to be able to take advantage of the renewable energy source. So that's the project. So just a few things about it. We're in the middle of design, but we need to get the system designed and built by the September of 2023. So we have our work set up, our work cut out for us. I really have to give credit to the leadership in Rochester to have a vision of what they want. And it really is foundational and transformational to position the city for renewable energy. And that is converting our buildings from the 180-degree water they are now down to 130, and then having the district piping connection. And that piping in the ground has a 50-year life. So who knows what the future technologies are out there, and we'll be in a position. That's why it's foundational. It's adaptable and scalable to take advantage of whatever technologies are available. And then we're also encouraging the public or other private development to connect. And we're hoping that by doing this, we can encourage other people to look at these different types of energy systems. And it's a pathway to get to net zero. There also is an equity component to this, where some of the adjacent parcels are being looked at for workforce housing. I'm excited about potential green job training with some of the technologies that we put together. And so that's a possibility. Having this system gives us a lot of resiliency. We have multiple energy sources and redundancies shared amongst a lot of different groups. There's other property that's south of 4th Street in Rochester, many, many acres that has the potential to be developed that could also have a district energy system. So we're designed to be connected to future developments. And as I mentioned, we're trying to be a catalyst and a demonstration project for other groups. So that is really the main point of my presentation on the project. The rest of these slides are more on our geothermal exploration and what we're doing. This slide happens to be from a group that's worked with a lot of colleges, but it's the same thing for cities there. You can see the geothermal wells and then the interconnected buildings with low temperature hot water, which is 130 degrees. And then the buildings converted to be able to operate with that low temperature water. So that gives us a way to share simultaneous heating and cooling between buildings. And if we can purchase electricity that's renewable, then we have a renewable energy source. So there's a couple technologies that we're studying. We have a feasibility study that is being jointly funded by the City of Rochester, Olmsted County, Mayo Clinic, and the DMC to look at two different types of geothermal technologies. One of them is aquathermal energy storage, which is underground energy, which takes the water from an aquifer and then runs it through a heat exchanger and puts it back down into an aquifer. And it doesn't consume the water, but it does bring it up. But it's a different technology than what most people might be familiar with geothermal. I think most people are familiar with one borehole and that it's a conductive way of going through the earth to get the energy. One of these wells is equal to maybe 20 or 30 of those other wells. So it's a huge technology jump. And the water temperature that's delivered back down is within 8 degrees. So there's not, I think they've done a lot of work with protecting the aquifers, protecting the water supply, but taking advantage of this resource that is below. Rochester has a nice set of aquifers. We did do a test well recently, and we have some very high quality aquifers under Rochester that will really support this technology. This is another slide from Underground Energy, just showing what a wellhead looks like. They chose on a college campus to just make it visible, to make people aware that that is a geothermal well. And they did talk about using at the Ford site in St. Paul. And here's kind of a section through Rochester, and you can see there's the dark colored areas are aquifers, and there's two very large aquifers, the Prairie du Chien and the Jordan Aquifer under Rochester, and the water is a consistent 49 degrees. And that's what a heat pump in a geothermal system, that's what they do. They simply just take that energy that's already in the earth and transfer it. This is a Darcy Solutions, is another technology that we're having a feasibility study conducted. This is a little different, where that heat exchanger is down in the aquifer, maybe 140 feet in the ground, and the water never leaves the aquifer. It goes through a pump, a heat exchanger, and then potable water is in a closed loop, the green lines there. So the potable water and the green lines never interact with the blue aquifer water. So it's just a closed loop that goes back up to a heat pump and comes back and takes the heat from one exchanger and brings it to another one. You can see off to the left, traditional ground source heat pumps, the normal boreholes, you would need 20 to 30 of those to equal one. And the water will vary from 30 degrees to 95, which is a high variance, and it's difficult for the heat pumps to operate with that sort of a swing, where the other systems can maintain a constant water temperature to the heat pump. I apologize for getting so technical on there, but there's just a lot of capacity from these new wells in this new technology. Again, this is just a way to illustrate, if you have a natural gas boiler and you put in one therm, you might get 0.8 out. higher efficiency furnaces can get 0.9 or 0.95. If you look at electric resistance heater, you get one unit in can equal 1 unit out. But the electric heat pump can get 3 to 7 units out because it takes the energy either from the air or from the earth. And so that's why the G pump, and normally a heat pump is 3 units out, but with the simultaneous heating and cooling and having all the buildings connected, you're able to just transfer heat from buildings. That's why some of these installations can get 7 units out for every 1 unit put in. So that makes it very economical. This is another chart that just shows what the total emissions are for the various. To the right is an electric heater. That's where the electricity is not renewable. And then the NGF is natural gas fuel, non-condensing boiler, condensing boiler. And then the 2 off to the right are heat pumps. And you can see off to the left, the total emissions. If you have electricity that is renewable, then this is what that chart looks like. The electric is carbon free. That's the end of my presentation. I'll stop sharing.
I
And then
did
I
it
can-
for you.
Okay, and so thank you both Scott and Lauren for your presentations this evening. We are going to move on to the question part of our program tonight. You can ask your questions through chat by clicking on the green box at the bottom of your screen. League of Women Voters will be putting them together and forwarding them on to me. There is also, because we have a smaller audience this evening, we've also throw out this possibility that if you want to raise your hand or put a note into the chat box to ask a question, we'll go ahead and unmute you and possibly, if we can, highlight you, screen share you so that you can ask the question. And I want to thank both Lauren and Scott. And also, you may have to clarify something for me if I'm going to be asking the questions tonight. So, Lauren, you gave a background on how you came up with the plan by getting community input and also focusing on equity, which sometimes historically has not been a priority, and what it means for residents, and breaking it down into strategies and tactics. And then Scott, you talked about the technology, the engineering for the district, which means the city-owned buildings. And so my question to get us started with is, are the tactics and strategies, and I'm guessing that this is for the city-owned buildings as a technology you were talking about, Scott, and are the tactics and strategy and the plan, is that for residents in general? And I know you commented that Scott, that what you're doing is to use it as a demonstration and a catalyst, but the tactics and strategy, is that for residents or for the city, the districts for implementing this plan? So just help me clarify that so I understand how this works. If you
Sure. Yeah, it's actually for both. So there are strategies that are specifically focused on the city, the municipality, commercial buildings in general. And then there are strategies and tactics that are meant to kind of help build up the funding or the resources that would help residents do these same things. So, kind of looking at district energy, while it's initially a municipal effort, as Scott mentioned, there will be opportunity to expand that to private developments. Same thing, kind of on the residential side of things, there are strategies in the plan such as a green loan program, which would, if we can get that up and running, would help residents make their homes more energy efficient. So just like you can do heat pumps in a district energy system, you can transition your home to operate off of a heat pump as well. So there are kind of tactics at every level that, like, again, it's a city plan, it's a community plan, so it's meant to help residents as well.
And then another thing is, so I know I was reading in my RPU plugged in, they were talking about that the West Side Solar Project, that was going to help get them to another step forward to the RPU becoming 100% renewable by 2030. The other way that energy is provided to our homes is by gas. And so that's my question, is that getting off of gas for gas, you know, that's as a renewable, you know, gas is, there's problems with gas. And that as a home, you know, like a lot of people have their furnace and their water heaters by gas. So explain to me how that works and what you have control over, what you don't have control over, what you can impact, what you can't. Go ahead.
I can probably start. I don't know how technical I can get into it, but essentially what we're looking to do is move towards electrification of all things. So as we move to decarbonize or get away from natural gas and fossil fuels, we're looking at mass electrification to replace that. So not only are we looking at electrifying our buildings, like Scott has discussed, but our vehicles and then our homes as well. So heat pumps in homes are something that would help you remove that natural gas aspect. And depending on the home and the kind of output or energy use, the pricing can depend on it. But again, that's resources that we're trying to set up that would walk residents who are interested in taking that step, what that process would look like, what the financing would look like. And then again, at the next level, if we can create a loan system that would help people with that, even better.
And Scott, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think there's strategies and tactics, you know, our learnings. One of the key things that we learned was when we looked at converting our building from 180 to 130, it was millions of dollars and multiple millions. But what we did was during the winter, when it was zero, we turned our water to 130 and and we were measuring to see how the building performed. They performed very well. So our engineers then were able to rethink the level of work that had to be done in those buildings and drastically reduce the cost. So that's something that other property owners can try, is just convert their building to 130 and see how much work is really required to get to 130 from 180. Okay,
thank you for that. And now I'm going to move on to audience questions now that I kind of have it a little bit clearer in my mind. Once the current steam line is decommissioned, will the waste to energy facility still contribute to the renewable resources?
Well, when we disconnect from the waste to energy, they're still burning waste to generate heat to serve other buildings. And so that will still be in effect. They'll still be taking that waste and converting it to energy there. It's just the piping that goes a mile downtown will be shut off, but they're still serving multiple buildings with that, and they could use that steam to generate electricity. You know, they could do other things with that steam. So that's still serving that function.
Okay.
Could I add a comment to that? I think too, when we think, you know, a lot of times people think waste to energy is this, you know, great alternate option or renewable energy source, but in reality, it is waste that we're burning, and the goal is to reduce our waste. So at some point in time, hopefully we aren't producing that much waste, and we can look at other ways or smaller sources for using that steam, but the goal really is to how much waste can we divert from our landfill. We're lucky that we can burn it so that we aren't contributing large amounts to a landfill, but we do still want to be composting as much as we can, because that in turn can also be turned into energy. Looking at biogas, we also want to be recycling as many materials as we can to get them back in the market, and a useful, life cycle. Waste is really the last resort. So hopefully as we continue to build out processes and systems, we can start to even move away from that type of energy as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Can you comment on how the city plan relates to Mayo Clinic's plan for future energy sustainability and the DMC project?
I don't know specifically how the plans might relate, but I know that we work very closely with Mayo Clinic and with the DMC. So Kevin Bright from DMC, him and I pretty much collaborate on any project or initiative the city or DMC takes on in relation to sustainability aspects of it. Mayo Clinic, their sustainability director, was on the task force that helped create the sustainability plan. She's also on our energy commission now. And so we're regularly connected with what each of our entities are doing so that we can be sharing best practices and figuring out how we might support each other and their endeavors.
Okay. The next question on our list is, before I go on, I want to give a shout out to some of our representatives, elected representatives that are here this evening. Olmsted County, Stephanie Podolsky, State Senator Dave Senjum, and State Senator Carla Nelson. Thank you for attending this. And if you would want to input anything, send a chat or raise your hand. And now I will go on to our next question. Are you putting in the water pipes this summer, and where is the energy being generated? Those are two questions. Yes,
this is tricky because we have to put in the district energy piping during the shoulder seasons when we can shut off the steam. So in the spring, we will have our plans ready. We're in design. And it's a very aggressive schedule, but we're in design, and we'll get our contractors on board in third quarter of this year, get them early ordering material. It's very aggressive, but it's doable. But yes, we will have to put the pipes in the summer when we can shut off the steam lines and have the thing operational by the time we need heating in the fall. It's a very tricky thing, but we do have a plan. The disruption to the building should be minimal. We're really thinking a couple of days, the way because we can leave the steam running while we're building some of the new piping. The steam is a different route than where we're putting some of this piping in the street.
Okay, and Lauren, do you have anything to add? I know you're not the technology part, but I'll go. Oh, go ahead.
No, I think Scott answered that perfectly.
Okay, and then I'm going to go into the next one. This question is, do geothermal wells pose any risk to water quality in our local aquifers? And I'll go ahead and address this to Scott, because I think this is your area.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of discussions on that. And I know the Minnesota Department of Health is involved, and these companies have done a lot of work. They are the one Darcy Solutions has been permitted in Minnesota. And I believe they are safe. I know people are concerned about that, but I think that has been addressed. The water with the Darcy system never leaves the aquifer. And with the other system, it goes through the heat pump, goes back down in the aquifer.
Okay. Thank you for that. The next one is, how will you be done in time to heat buildings by winter of 23? This looks like a huge endeavor to accomplish by that date.
Yes,
Scott,
that's what I was. Yeah, that's what I was. Yes, we will have this done by the time to heat the buildings in the winter of 23. And it's a coordinated dance. We can leave some of the steam on while we do some of the other installations. Some of the buildings have chillers already in them, the library and the civic center. So those chillers will be running during the cooling season, and we can leave the steam connected to the city hall till the last minute, and because the city hall has steam chillers and steam boilers. So yes, we do have a plan on how we can do this.
Okay, good luck. And now another question is, the city document regarding what the Climate Emergency Task Force came up with was watered down from what was originally discussed. Will the city come back with a strengthened document similar to the Twin Cities? And can you share with us if you are aware what the Twin Cities document is?
Yes, so earlier this year, it started kind of late 2021. There was a cohort of elected city officials, city council members from various cities, mayors, things like that around the state of Minnesota that started meeting to discuss declaring a climate emergency. Just understanding that there's federal funding and new programs being put in place, and really wanting to do a joint climate emergency declaration across the state with as many participants as possible to really just show, the emphasis on this and the need for the state to support these types of efforts, both at the state level and at the federal level. So it was brought, Rochester had a few city council members and the mayor that were participating in this cohort, and it was brought to them early in 2022. At the same time, city sustainability staff had actually just contracted with Center for Energy and Environment to kind of do an update and look at our current goals that we've adopted as a city and kind of what we might want to change those goals, understanding that a lot of places are adopting more aggressive climate action goals. What we were having our consultants look at is preparing, we have our energy action plan, we now have the sustainability plan, we have all of these strategies outlined. What's the actual greenhouse gas emissions impact of each of those strategies? So they're right now working on an analysis that will share that with us, so we know exactly what strategies to pursue to get started that are going to get us the farthest, the fastest towards reaching our goals. So knowing that we kind of had this more information in the works and that was to come, and that there were a few city council members that weren't really comfortable with the term emergency and climate emergency and just wanted additional background and information on this and bringing it forward. The wording was kind of drawn back a bit to what a lot of other cities released. So it was a joint release in January or February, sometime earlier this year. The mayor of Rochester released a similarly strongly worded proclamation that matched what the Twin Cities and other cities in Minnesota put out. And we'll come forward in actually April here when we have the rest of our analysis and information put together to bring it back to City Council to kind of create that complete picture of, this is where our current goals are at. These are the plans and the strategies we've adopted. This is the resources it's going to take to implement them. And this is the goals that we'd like to see based on this data that we have. So the mayor did put out a proclamation that matched what some of the other cities did. And we're hoping our city council, given the additional information that we're putting together, will agree and sign on to something similar in April.
And Scott, do you have anything? Thanks, Lauren. Do you have anything that you would like to add to that? Okay,
No.
I'll go on to another question. So Scott, in your presentation, you were talking about the geothermal, the technology, engineering like that. Is there one of the participants is asking, is there a solar energy portion of this energy plan?
Yes, we also looked at solar PV, but we are contractually limited in implementing that. We can't do that till after 2030 based on our electrical contracts, but we do have it designed in to our system. And we also have solar thermal that we can implement, and we have the capacity to add that if we had the money. We would be able to add that to the Civic Center. The Civic Center was designed for solar panels when it was built. So
when you say solar thermal,
oh, I'm sorry.
mean?
I'm sorry. So solar thermal is just running water and having the sun heat the hot water. And then that's a source of heat that could go for heating, where the solar PV is generating electricity.
Okay, Thank
Okay.
you. So another question, what is the status of the bonding proposal right now?
Well, I understand that it's expected to be in the governor's bill with a 50-50 match for our proposed project. It'd be at 15.8 million. And then there's a Senate bill and a companion House bill that have been prepared and I believe submitted, or I'm not sure what the status is. Maybe someone on the line can speak to that, but it is in progress, I guess.
Okay, because those things are at the Senate and the House move fast and changes happen daily. So we'll look to see if anybody wants to add anything to that. And then I'll go to the next question. Who is going to be using the district energy system? And maybe you've already addressed that, but I should throw that out just in case that.
Yeah, I can speak to that. Well, originally, or as soon as initially, it will be just city buildings, but we have designed it with taps and we've got capacity in the pipes. So we could get private developers, and we would encourage private developers to connect. The more people that connect, the more efficient the system will get. So we've designed it to allow, if you recall that plan where we had those 4 adjacent lots that are undeveloped, the city owns 3 of them. And then one of them's a private developer, but we would be talking to folks that are planning to do private developments to encourage them to connect. And we've gotten some local businesses that have inquired about the ability to connect as well. So there is interest.
Would proximity, so proximity to that would be important, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Lauren, I think you were going to add something.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but I think too, the more buildings that connect to the system, the more economical it gets for each of the participants that are getting energy from that system as well. So
That's correct.
it is better to have more people join on the system later on.
Yeah, it spreads it out. Plus, if there's like a data center or something that generates a lot of heat, that really makes it efficient, because instead of rejecting that heat outside, they reject it into the system and it can be used by other folks. So that simultaneous heating and cooling being shared amongst the system can make a huge difference in lowering everyone's costs, because that's heat that's not being generated.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know. And this question I'm going to throw out, and so here's a question, but I'm going to ask another question that Lauren will answer while you're looking this up, possibly, or looking for it. Do you have the bill numbers, the bonding bill? And I'll let you look for that, Scott, if you possibly have it, or if anybody else has it, put it in. Oh, do you have it there?
I do.
Oh, then go ahead. I thought you might have to look for it. So go ahead with that. I wanted to give you time.
The Senate one is SF 3800 and Senator Senjum. And then the House is the companion bill is HF 4436, and Liebling is the author of that one.
Okay, and I see a couple of our League of Women Voters, Minnesota. We have a observer in Lobby Corps, and I see a couple of them there. I think that's where that question came, because they're following different bills. So next, and thank you for that. And now this question is for Lauren, I think. What are some of the tactics or strategies in regards to affordable housing?
So really, when we're looking at that, I can pull up the plan to be more descriptive too, but when we're talking about affordable housing, it's really kind of how we develop our cities and everything that goes into making housing affordable. So walkability to places, easy access to locally grown fresh foods, transportation, how the house is built. A really good example of affordable housing and goes to energy. So if we're building houses that aren't necessarily to par, or maybe just the bare minimum of our building and energy codes, they're probably not as energy efficient as they can be. Same with apartments or multifamily units. A lot of times, it's easier on the developer to just, check the boxes that need to be checked. And it might not mean the building itself is operating as efficiently as it could be. And so what that means is that that burden is being put on the individuals in the household. So not only are you thinking about the cost of your rent or your mortgage payment, but also your utility payments that you're making every month. And if you have a building or a home that isn't running as energy efficiently as it could be, you probably have higher utility payments. So not only thinking about how we're building our buildings, but where we're locating them, what they have access to, kind of all goes into affordable housing, how we're reusing existing space or buildings in our community to just be kind of create that complete or full circle picture of sustainability and recycling things as well.
Okay, thank you for that, Lauren. So another question is, what happens to those who choose not to use the district energy system? Will there be consequences, or like sticks and carrots? Are we using mostly carrots, or, and I will go ahead. Who wants to take this? So either Lauren or Scott.
I can take it first. I think the discussions we've had are more carrot than stick. I think there's a green economy out there. I think there's some intangibles to being on a system that's renewable, and we're going to make the cost economical. I think we can meet some of their economic needs. I hope we can when we get our analysis done of the modeling of this, so we can sit in front of a developer and say, here's your cost long-term with your normal system. Here's what it would cost if you connect to district energy. But we do own the 3 properties, 3 of the adjacent parcels, so maybe we can have some influence as we negotiate with these folks. But it's more carrot than stick. Lauren, I don't know if you had anything to add.
Yeah, I can't imagine there's not any consequences to not, or you're not going to be reprimanded, I guess, for not joining the system. Like we said earlier, it's a benefit. The more people that are on the system, the more economical it becomes. It is just going to start out as city facilities, and I think people will see, it's a good example that the city can do and show the effects of and the savings that comes from it, and hopefully that will just kind of encourage others to want to participate in the system as well.
Okay, thank you. So I have a question here. Please explain why you have to wait for 2030 for solar. I don't know. Go ahead if you think you know what they're asking there.
Well, I don't deal directly. This is an RPU question, but we have an agreement with SIMPA, with the company that provides our electricity, that prohibits us from generating our own electricity. So that's a simple answer that I have to that. We're restricted from generating electricity. I guess we can do a small amount. I don't know all the details, but we're prohibited from installing it and operating it until 2030.
Go ahead, Lauren.
To add to that, it's renewable energy, and really the basis of it right now is that all of it, to get more technical, is sold to the market. And so the economics of it don't work out right now because of that contract, because any energy we generate from the renewable system would have to get sold back to the basic market that would be purchased at a lower rate. So it really comes down to the financing of solar. It's not that we necessarily couldn't do solar, but financially it just wouldn't make sense to install a solar system based on how it ends up getting sold and traded in the market. So we are looking for grants that might help us pursue some solar installations, but we would need significant grants to help cover those costs and make it economical in the long run.
But RPU is on a path to be 100% renewable by 2030, correct? Because of their developing those farms. Okay, but because we have a contract with RPU, it doesn't go directly, it's sold, and it doesn't, we can't say right now that that's 100% until 2030.
Yep, and kind of the same way with how the market works is we'll be able to be 100% renewable because all of the energy that RPU will be purchasing from the market will be purchased from renewable resources. So even though we'll have some existing renewables set up in our community, like the 10 megawatt solar farm, we won't have the amount of renewables installed in our community that would generate the electricity that we would be using as an entire city, but we'll be purchasing our electricity from a grid that is clean energy, if that makes sense.
After the contract. So
Yep.
give me a context of what 10 megawatts is. Like, what does Rochester proper use for? Do you have any idea? Because when we throw out these big numbers, I need to put them in context. Okay. I'll have to look into that because those big numbers mean nothing, or though they're big. Okay.
Yeah, it gets a little more technical and into the weeds for me on that.
Okay, so I'm going to go to another question. Do you have plans for solar panels put onto new buildings in anticipation for the 2030 change in our contract that limits its use now? Do either of you, go ahead, Scott.
So I think,
Go ahead, Laura.
I was going to say, I think we kind of just touched on that. We've been in communication with like Rochester Airport. They're interested in doing like a solar panel carports to provide better coverage and protection in their parking lot. We've talked about solar on the Mayo Civic Center because the roof is really well slated for that. When we redid the building that is now the Development Services and Infrastructure Center, where our community development and public works and the North Precinct are located, that roof was slated to hold solar in the future. So it's our things we are thinking about and planning for. But again, it just comes down to financing options that might become available that would make it worthwhile to pursue.
And I'll add, if we ever build a new building again, we'll definitely be looking at all of these ideas. So we would definitely look at solar and other renewable ideas if we built a new building, if that was the question.
Okay. And I'm going to ask this question. How likely is the city to achieve its energy goal by 2030 and 2050 if district energy becomes or does not become a reality? But it's really sounds like it's on the path to become a reality, right? Or
it's dependent on the bonding.
Oh,
So we'll find out in May.
okay.
And if
So-
it's not successful, we'll have to figure out what we do, whether we can find other ways to finance it, or we have to go back to a more traditional gas furnace and chillers in each building. Either way, we have to have some heat by next year. We have a pivot plan if we have to.
So this is really dependent on the bonding going through.
It is, unless we can find some other financing option, which I'm not aware that we can. So
Okay.
To
ahead,
add to
Lori.
that too, well, regardless of the district energy system, the 2030 goal of renewable energy that will still happen. The greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals, we are on track to meet our 2025 goal of 30% emissions reductions, but we will not be and are not on track to meet the 2050 goal of 80% greenhouse gas emissions reduction. So again, that's kind of why we pursued this sustainability plan and why we're now taking the next step with Center for Energy Environment to do an analysis of all of those strategies so that we know the exact greenhouse gas impacts of each of those strategies and we know what to pursue first.
Okay, thank you. So this, you may or may not be able to answer this. How smoothly do residential solar panels integrate with RPU? Do either of you have any idea about that?
I think it's fairly easy it's the city as a municipal entity that can't install solar really, but residents and private developers certainly can. And again, those are things that we're working on. We know examples of people who have gone through the process, but we're also putting together kind of infographics or documents that we can share with the community to make it easier for them to pursue solar should they be interested in it. We're also working on checklists for permitting to make permitting easier. And we are Sol Smart certified as a community. So we have already taken a look at and put things in place that do make it easier for residents or private developers to install solar.
And then get credit for feeding into the grid.
Yep. And there's actually been so there are incentives to install solar right now. And I can't remember if it's at the state or the federal level, but you do get tax incentives if you're putting in solar installations, and there's been a huge uptick in those because they will be fading off in the next year or so. So a lot of people have been recently looking at installing solar permitting applications, and we actually, I can probably look up, if you give me a second here, the total that we've looked at already.
Okay, I'll ask another question. I'll address it to Scott. I'm going to go back to that. Okay, this is kind of a long question. Thank you, Lauren, for doing that. How is RPU preparing for the EV trend and the demand for charging facilities in homes? Electrical demand will grow as the numbers of EV charging increases, but so will the opportunity to use them as distributed storage systems. This will present one type of challenge and another type of opportunity. From a strictly demand side, how is RPU positioned as increasing numbers of buildings use heat pumps to heat buildings and to heat water? So I think what they're talking about, like I think I've heard where if a lot of people are using EVs and they have the EV as like a storage kind of battery, I mean, because batteries are an issue about having power on demand. You have to have the batteries to have that power. Go ahead. You know more about this, Scott, than I probably do.
I really don't. I've just seen presentations from RPU, and they certainly have that on their radar. I can't speak with any authority on how they're preparing for that, but I know they're anticipating these electric vehicles, and they're fully supportive of the heat pumps that we're proposing for district energy. I apologize. I don't have a specific response to that. Okay.
And do you have anything on that, Lauren? If not, that's fine.
Could you repeat the questions? I'm sorry, I was looking up the solar installations.
Yes. So how is RPU preparing for the EV trend and the demand for charging facilities in homes? Electrical demand will grow as the number of EV charging increases, but so will the opportunity to use them as distributed storage systems. This will present one type of challenge and another type of opportunity. So have you heard anything about that through your connections?
Yeah, so this is something actually that the Energy Commission has brought up and discussed. So RPU presented to the Energy Commission in December of last year on their resource plan and what they had outlined for that. And kind of this concept of mass electrification was something that the Energy Commission brought up. And so it's something that city staff is working with in our continued discussions with RPU on what this looks like, and are we making sure we're evaluating the electrification from all sectors, not just the energy sector, but the transportation and the building sector as well, because not only are we thinking about energy, but mass electrification with EVs and public transit and things like that, but also, as we talked about earlier, putting heat pumps to electrify homes. So are we making sure we have the full picture of the electric needs the community will have? And this is something that we are incorporating in the analysis that we're working on right now with Center for Energy and Environment, really making sure we have a clear picture of what those electrification needs will look like and if the resource plan can match that.
Okay. And Scott, did you have anything to, oh, you already
No, I don't. Thank you.
And then I just want to state what you put in the chat in case some people are not reading it. This is from Lauren. In 2021, there were 67 residential solar installations. That was up from 33 in 2019 and 36 in 2020. And I think we have reached the end. Oh, somebody says that they have solar panels installed and sell what I generate to the grid already. And so we have that input, and I'm just going to check a few other things. And I think I'm going to look at my other list, and I think we've reached maybe all of the, oh, no, there's a couple more, I think. Oh, how large an area could the district energy system grow? What's your view possibility?
Well, it has a capacity to grow. If all those adjacent lots connect, we'll have to build another energy station. So this thing is scalable. And if you look at what Rochester has south of 4th Street, maybe Lauren knows exactly how many acres. It's a huge parcel of land that could be developed. And that could have a district energy system if that gets developed. And our system is designed to be connected to other systems to provide redundancy, resiliency. So it could be very large. It's scalable. It's just a matter of getting the pipes to the building, getting the buildings converted to 130-degree water so they can use what we supply. And then where we can put geothermal wells, whatever other technology comes down the road, it could be very large. And it could even be residential. I mean, you could almost see some of these geothermals, if a geothermal well can do 30 tons, well, that's 15 homes, 10 homes. So you could almost have residentials on some district energy of some sort. We don't think that way, but we could in the future.
I think definitely, yeah, I think that is kind of the future. You know, you can have multiple district energy systems set up and connected. You know, the City of Rochester participates in Climate Smart Municipalities program. And so there are 5 cities. It's expanded quite a bit from that, but started as 5 cities in Minnesota that are partnered with 5 cities in Germany. And when the Minnesota partners, we were just there this last September, and one of the presentations that our German partners gave were on residential district energy systems. So it's something they're already looking at and pursuing over there. So it really, you know, that kind of is the direction we're hoping to move.
Okay, thank you. So a question I have that was with RPU, and you may not be able to answer this, but prior to COVID, there was some discussion of building a gas-powered peaker plant for energy. Did that ever get built? And the problem was is that we need, even if we go to batteries for storing energy for peak demand, that if we build this gas peaker power plant, we are invested for like 30 or 40 or 50 years. Do you know if that got built or is in the plans to be built? Because that keeps us tied to gas.
It's not built that I know of, but I know it's still in discussion. So as they're looking to how they, you know, kind of prepare for this 2030 transition, it's something that was on the table. Again, it's come up in discussions with the Energy Commission and even from past members of the Energy Commission and the public that are advocating against it. You know, understanding that technology might not be here today, but by 2030, we likely probably will have the technology necessary to avoid that. So I know it's in discussion. I know it was something that was in review, but I can't imagine anything would have been built yet at this point.
Okay. And you're shaking your head. Yes, that that's what your thoughts are too.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. That's my understanding as well.
Okay, great. I think that we've come to the end of questions, but I have one question. So let's say somebody was remodeling or their gas water heater or their gas furnace went kaput today. What are the things that a residential person, resident of Rochester could do now to align themselves with a sustainable, resilient Rochester today if they have to do that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I can give some general indications. Again, you know, it's not a process I've gone through myself, but Kevin, my colleague, has gone through it in his own home, and we've had other people in the community reach out. A few energy commissioners have done it in their homes as well. So it is possible. I think, you know, for sure connect with us because people in our department can connect you to the right resources. We'd want to connect with our utility partners because not only are there financing options, but there are rebates that are possibly available that can help finance a project like that, but also to understand the energy use of your home and what type of heat pump would need to be put in, because sometimes depending on that, there are other necessities from the utility side of things that might need to be installed. So the price really can range. I've heard it costs $3,000 for some homes to go electric. I've heard it can cost up to $10,000 for some homes to go to electric. So it really depends, but I think even just knowing who to reach out to, I don't necessarily have the exact answer here, but I could connect you to the people who could walk you through that process or who have gone through the process themselves.
So if I look up on Rochester government or administration, I could find your name and send you an email. Is that correct? I'm saying this for the audience. Is that right?
Mhm.
Scott would be under city administration. I'd be under the community development department.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you. If anybody in the audience would like, oh, go ahead, Scott.
Well, I was going to say RPU has people that can help. So RPU would be a great contact, but I'll be happy to forward some names on to whoever wants some information.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you, both of you. I think we've gotten, okay, and here's a suggestion. I'm just going to read out, I haven't read it before, but suggest anyone interested in future or climate energy, watch the House Tuesday and Thursday, 10:30, and Senate Tuesday and Thursday at 3. Go to the Minnesota Legislature website and tune it up to listen to bill hearings and interesting presentations. And if you don't know how to get there, you could email the League of Women Voters and we would help you get to the right place, get you the links there. And I think we have had our email address in the chat. And thank you for having us tonight. I appreciate the interest in the work and the opportunity to share. That's what you said, Lauren.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
And Scott or Lauren, do you want to add final comments?
No, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much. This was very enlightening for me, understanding how this works with the city and the plan and having tactics and strategy. It sounds like that is wonderful to break that down into all of those and with measurable and also goal by timeline. So thank you so much. And I think we got to all of the questions, and I want to go ahead and remind people that you can join LWV in the chat box. There is a connection, a link there. And also League of Women Voters Rochester invites you to our next event, which is the annual spring membership. Public is invited. We're going to have a speaker, Virginia Wright Peterson. She's going to talk on Rochester, the city you thought you knew. And also in the fall, we have candidate forums because we have elections coming up, and I think the candidate forums start in August, and we will also be having voter registration. So join us, and thank you all for coming tonight and for your great questions. It makes my job easier. And also thank you, Lauren and Scott, for your explanation that was very understandable and giving us better understanding of our plan for a sustainable and resilient Rochester. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night. Good night.